Hi, my name is Nully. I play Judomaster and Peacemaker, and you're watching Pop Culture with Pat.
Hey guys, welcome back to Pop Culture with Pat. So, really excited. Today we got another special guest on the show. We're going to be talking all things Peacemaker with Judo Master himself, Na Lee. Thank you for coming on the show today. Now,
Yeah, thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good.
Awesome. Well, yeah, I'm really excited to talk to you, and it's great that it's after the show is done. So heads up, guys, this will have spoilers in here. So if for some reason you haven't seen the show, just a heads up. But I mean, most of you guys probably have because the show absolutely exploded. It was one of the most popular shows in the world. So by the way, congratulations now on the success to you and the rest of the cast on the success of the show.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad people have been receiving it so well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it really, really took off. And to start things off, first, especially for first time guests on the show, I always, I always ask you guys, how did you, first get into acting? What was the kind of the inspiration behind that?
I first started acting around 10 or 11 years old. My high school was doing a musical production of South Pacific, and they needed a little Asian boy to play one of the roles. So they asked me to do it, and I had a lot of fun doing it. I was an only child at that time, so being around like all these like cool, like what I thought were adults, just like singing and dancing and having fun. I liked it a lot, so I just kept doing regional theater until I went to college for acting and then went up to New York and then moved up to LA to pursue it full time.
And then, now you're here and, we're talking about Peacemaker. So how did the role for Peacemaker come about for you? And what were those initial conversations like with James Gunn once you actually got the role?
Yeah, so the audition process took about a month. At first, my reps sent in my martial arts, like fighting choreography reel, and then the production team and James liked it, and so they asked me to send in a few more tapes and then do like sides for like reading audition, and then I had a meeting with the fight coordinator, and then I didn't hear back from them for like a week or so, so I didn't think I got it. And then I reached out to my team and I was like, "Hey, did you guys hear anything?" And then they were like, "Yeah, we'll give you a call in 30 minutes." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And then they called me and they're like, "So we have to talk about this offer that came through." And I was like, "Wait, what?" Um, and when I got offered the role, it was for a different name. I didn't know I was playing Judo Master. It wasn't until the costume department uh, I got CC'd on an email that said, "Oh, we found our Judo Master. We're gonna fit him in like whatever date." And I was like, "Wait, what?" And so I like went online and Googled it real quick, and I was like, "Is this a superhero?" Because when I auditioned the role, the character's name was martial artist. And so I just thought he was like some henchman or something. So
Yeah.
to find out that I was playing an established comic book character was sort of mind blowing.
Yeah, that must have been, really exciting too. Yeah, because I know sometimes they do that, especially with superhero, projects. Sometimes they'll kind of hide character names, just to as you guys are like getting like the roles. So that must have been what was it like actually trying on like the outfit for the first time?
It was so wild because we had a fitting back in January before I left to Vancouver, just like an initial fitting. And then it wasn't until I got up to Vancouver, like a few days before we started like stunt training and rehearsing, that I tried on the full outfit for James and like Peter Safran and Simon Hatz, like and John Stark, and like who are the other producers of the project that I actually got to like meet them. And it was so cool. Like when I put it on, I just like become someone so different because of the way the costume moves and the cowl, and like you can only see like partial vision, so it's like a whole experience in that person's eyes.
Yeah, I was gonna say it must have been. I imagine it must have been kind of a surreal moment to do that. And I wanted to ask you too, because I know you have martial arts, background. How long have you been doing that as well? Have you been doing that longer than acting, or is that something that you started later on?
So I've been out in LA for about 10, 11 years, just trying to get some traction any way I could. So at first I started in the improv route. I took classes at Groundlings and UCB, trying to like, do like the comedy and like hopefully segue into acting that way. But I didn't get very far with that. So then I thought maybe I've seen people like go the stunt route, where they are like action actors.
Yep.
And so I started training about 2 years before the audition for Peacemaker, because originally I heard that Netflix was doing a live action of Avatar: The Last Airbender that I wanted to audition for. So so yeah, and then Peacemaker came, and I was like, oh yeah, I already have these set of skills, like improv, martial arts, like acting. So I think it turned out as a perfect fit.
Yeah, yeah. Talk about, you never know. You intend to do this for one thing, and then it ends up getting you this job, playing this great character on Peacemaker. That's a pretty cool story.
Yeah.
When we meet now, when we meet your character, he's already Judomaster and has been this character presumably for a while now. It seems like. So, did you give him any kind of background, as an actor? Because I know some people do that, some people don't. And how he got to this point, and did like you and James talk about that at all?
Whatever James wrote in the script, I sort of thought of that as my Bible, because when I first got the role, I like got their comic books and read Peacemaker, read Judomaster, and everybody, and uh, but what I had to go through was just what was written on the script. So in the series, we don't really get a lot of his backstory, um, but in my mind, I sort of have ideas of things that have affected him in the past to make him how he is. Like, he doesn't talk very much. And I think there's a reason that happened to him in the past that makes him that way. And in my mind, I always thought of him as a superhero trying to, help the butterflies, like make the world a better place, more sustainable place.
Yep.
So I never thought of him as a super villain. And I'm excited to see what happens to him in season two. Maybe flesh out some of his story if some of my ideas um, and James's collide. That would be cool. If not, I'm excited to see where it would take him.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, yeah, your character was great and seems to be, was a hit with the fans, as well. And and I'm sure you've been asked this before, but I have to ask you about filming the infamous intro for the show. Just one of I remember like the first time watching the show and seeing that intro, and I was just sitting there and I'm like, this is the most amazing thing I think that I've ever seen. Like,
Yeah.
and I feel like you don't get a lot of intros in shows. It seems like as much anymore, like you used to in the 80s, 90s, things like that. So the fact that this much was put into this intro is so cool. So just can you talk about your experience of working on that and filming that intro, that dance sequence?
Yeah, I thought it was a really great experience because um, for I think a lot of the actors, it was our first time getting everyone in the room, because when we had like the table read, it was done virtually because of COVID. So the dance intro was the first time like I got to meet some of the other actors that I don't have scenes with. Um,
Nice icebreaker.
yeah, and it was just sort of like a like everyone's doing this really silly thing, and it like yeah, we spent like whole day doing it, getting to talk with everyone. So yeah, it was a really great experience.
Did any of you guys, because I had, I've had Allison and I've had Annie on the show previously. Did you have any moments while doing this that you guys, cracked up and had to, film it again because of how goofy it kind of was?
All the time. I think one of the funniest time was at the end when we're supposed to like strike a pose, whatever we're in.
Yeah.
James's note was like, it's as if we're like performers, like like gymnasts, after their routine and they're like really tired and they're just like standing there frozen, just like heavy breathing, like looking around, not sure what to do.
Yeah, and I love the little touch at the end where John Cena, Peacemaker, he picks up your character and is holding you at the end. I thought that
Yeah.
was a great way to like to end the whole thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought it was so silly and so fun, and I was all for it.
Now the big thing, which I don't know, and obviously I'm sure you can't say anything about this, but I'm going to be really curious going into season two, is if James is going to keep this intro, if he's going to keep the same song, or if he's going to try and do something completely different. Because I feel like now the expectation is kind of there. It's like, oh, you had this killer, intro for this first season. What are you going to do now? Do you just keep that song, or do you try and see if you can strike, have lightning, strike again? So
Right.
that's probably one of the biggest things I'm looking forward to, just with like season two.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of faith and trust that he'll make the right choice. Some of our characters are no longer with us,
Yeah.
so I think we might have to do something else. But yeah, we'll see. It should be fun.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of thinking too. It's like, we're missing some of those characters, so we're obviously going to have to switch it up to some degree. So, we'll see what happens, but I can't wait to, I definitely trust, at this point, I've learned to, trust in James Gunn. He's an amazing, director. So I figure that he'll get it right. Uh,
Right.
so as far as Judomaster goes, I mean, you have a couple of, fight scenes throughout this, this first season of the show. So I wanted to talk to you about a couple of them. Obviously you faced off against John Cena, as Peacemaker a couple of times. Can you talk about, filming those scenes and what it was just like to work with, John Cena on the show, where I mean, he did the Suicide Squad before, but he's still pretty new to the whole like superhero thing too.
Yeah, working with John is so great. He's one of the nicest guys. And I remember in episode 4 in the parking lot fight with him, my character Leota shoots me, and I'm like, dying on the ground.
Yeah.
And after every take, he would come over and offer me his hand to like, help me up. And that happened like a dozen times, and every time he was there, and I was like, he didn't have to do that. But it just shows like how he is as a person and as a fellow actor. He's always there when we're doing our coverage, and like he's like so professional and so nice and so like witty that I learned so much from him.
Yeah. So I mean, as far as like, did he do a lot of improv as far as like a lot of his like lines, or was most of it, like the scripted stuff?
Yeah, so I would say maybe like 98% of what you see on the show is written by James. And if it sounds like it's like, just loose conversation, like that's just how good he is at writing dialogue. Um, but what's fun with James is like we'll do like a few passes of the scene as is written, and then he'll like give us like a take or two to, just have fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, I appreciate that.
That's always, yeah, I was to say it's always nice to kind of feel, be a part of that collaborative process and just kind of let you guys, do your thing to see if maybe, something might work, with one of those, like, two takes or whatever. But
Right.
that's cool as far as John goes. I mean, everything that I've seen, from interviews and stuff like that, he seems like a really stand-up guy. And you can just tell, I think, from watching the different interviews and things where he's wearing the costume around to all these different things. And so you can just tell that I think he had a lot of fun, playing this character as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure it was like a lot of pressure, to carry a whole show.
Yeah.
But he was always pleasant, super nice, and I look up a lot to him, to because he was like the title character, and how he carries himself with everyone on set and crew is just a really great learning experience for me.
Yeah, and it makes it, I feel like it makes it kind of easier, for everybody else on the crew too, where you have someone like that who's so nice and willing to just kind of give himself up to help, others, on the show as well. So that's, really cool to hear. And you also, you ended up fighting, facing off against Jennifer Holland as Harcourt. So can you just talk about that scene? Because I thought that was a pretty brutal fight between, you and her.
Yeah, I feel like Harcourt and Jen are such badasses. Like Jen has a dance background, and so when we got to work together, it was like very like efficient. Like we both know what we needed to do, and it was really a quick process with our fight. Um, and like when it came down to the day, I think we're both perfectionists in that we want to try to get it right. And so like even if we get hurt or something, we're like, let's do it again, let's do it so it's perfect, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we're both of that mindset, because I think that's one of my favorite fights was with her.
Yeah, no, I remember, watching it when we got to that point and just like, you guys hitting, it was like hitting like the toilet seat or something like that in like the bathroom or whatever. And it's just like, this is all, it's a show and stuff, but you're just like, ow, that you can just kind of feel, the pain for those characters. So I thought
Yeah.
that was, that was really well done. How many times do you remember, like how many times you guys ended up doing that scene?
We did it in sections. And so that fight scene, I think, took the whole day. So it was maybe like 10-ish hours.
Yeah, which it makes
Yeah.
sense. I mean, it was like I said, pretty intense fight, and it looks like a lot went into it. But yeah, no, it
Yeah.
came out awesome. So great job to both you and Jen as far as like that goes.
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. And as far as we were kind of talking about James Gunn. He's definitely one of my favorite directors working today. In Peacemaker, it obviously has a lot of comedy, to it. A lot of people, they're like, oh, it's a really funny show. But for me, it's a really good character study, not only of the main character Peacemaker, but also the rest of the cast members as well. Can you just talk about your experience, working with James Gunn overall, and what's the biggest thing that you took away, working with him?
Yeah, I think overall it was a very easy experience. You know, like when you're working with such a big director, there's a certain pressure to perform and to get it right. But I think with James, I've never really felt that kind of constricting pressure. I understood that I had to do my job and do it well, but it was never like a dictatorship on set. You know, it was very collaborative, and I was surprised by how easy it is for James and I to talk, because he would do like little tweaks here and there. And at the end of the day, I realized that like my job as an actor is just one little piece of the puzzle, you know? And so I sometimes see actors would argue with directors like, oh, like it should be this way or that way, but they don't really see the whole picture, you know?
Yeah.
And in being like such a not like a small character, but a small piece of this puzzle, I understand now after seeing the whole show as a piece that, you know, like what he wanted me to do was be this piece of the puzzle for this, you know, this overall thing. Um, and I think in that it helped me to like lose control a little more and just have fun and just have faith and trust in the director.
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, I mean, one of the things that I love about him too is just how great. I mean, his writing's phenomenal, but just the little details that goes into some of the characters. Even if it's not even necessarily the main character, but some of the little moments that each of the characters get. You don't always necessarily see that, and just as a fan watching a show or a movie, I really appreciate that, because then you're invested in this whole entire cast, which some of these characters, some people watching it might have never met before. So just I think those little details and stuff go a long way for sure.
Yeah,
Now,
it was great.
speaking of details, I wanted to ask you, just because there was like a theory that I had actually read online about this. Did James Gunn ever tell you why Judomaster liked to constantly eat spicy fries?
I think from last I remember, our conversation about it was that James himself liked hot Cheetos,
Okay.
and so he wanted my character to be like snacking the whole time. Um, but then I think it was his choice to make it flaming hot Cheetos. Um, So yeah, I think that's a funny thing. Like,
That's something from
when
him.
I was like first reading through the script, I'm like, why is he always eating? And then like at certain points, like in episode 7 when he goes to for the Harcourt fight and he like has his ding dong bitches entrance. When I was first reading it, like having read everything that happened before, and I'm like, Judomaster shows up. I'm like, oh, are you kidding? Like, this is the worst time for him to show up while they have like so much stuff on their hands.
Yeah.
So it was sort of funny, like playing him as like an annoyance, you know, that these characters have to deal with when they're like, there's so many other things they have to deal with.
Oh yeah. No, yeah. That episode where it's just like we got enough to worry about. We don't need to worry about, you going up here now too.
Right. Yeah.
So the theory, I don't know if you had like heard this. So the theory that I thought it was pretty interesting was that the reason Judomaster was eating these spicy fries was, and this was, obviously before we found out kind of what the butterflies were doing, but the theory was that he was eating those so that way the butterflies couldn't possess him and take over him because they don't like the spiciness, to the fries or whatever. So he was kind of doing that so that way they couldn't take over him. So I was like, oh, I thought that was kind of like an interesting theory. Of course, we get to the finale, and I guess you can kind of throw that away after we find out, what we know about the butterflies, at the end. But yeah, that was something that I was like, oh, I have to ask you about that.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting the amount of people that came up with that theory. And I mean, it makes sense and it works. But I think in my mind, at least, I'm not sure what James thinks, but like Judo Master is already working for the butterflies, you know, so there's no need for them to like go in and control him. He's already on their side.
Yeah,
So
that's true. No, that makes sense. So yeah, I was gonna say by the time we got to the finale, I was like, it doesn't really work so much anymore. But I thought, yeah, I was like, that's a pretty interesting, theory. So it's kind of funny.
yeah,
James was just like, this is a food that I like, so we're just gonna throw that in there as like a little Easter egg.
yeah, it's fun.
Now, for you, I guess now what was your favorite episode from the season, and do you have a favorite scene that sticks out to you as well?
I think my favorite episode might be episode 7. Just because James's writing in that episode is so good. Like his confrontation with his dad, like their last moments together, and then James has this like motif in, if you go back and see his like films, his protagonist is always like praying to God at some point, and like I love those scenes that he writes for that. And in episode 7, he does that when Eagly is at the vet and he's like praying to God. Um, yeah, so I think episode 7 would be my favorite, and my favorite scene to shoot, I think, would be the like the Cheeto flicking segment part. That was a fun day. Because that was like one of the first time where I worked with James and he was like, all right, for the next take or two, say whatever you want to John, you know, and back and forth. So we just like improved, and a lot of things were were pretty raunchy that we said that I don't think even made it into like the behind the scenes cut footage. But it was really funny.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I mean that was a great scene. Now, to follow up on that, this season it was filled with a bunch of big surprises, different reveals. What was the biggest one for you, and why?
I think the biggest reveal for me might have to be the fact that Mern was a butterfly.
Yeah,
Because when I read that, I was like, wait, what? So like, what is actually happening with the butterflies? Are there like different factions? Like, what is going on? You know? Because I think it was episode 4 that you find that out, and then you're like, because at first you didn't really know what the butterflies are, and then like come that surprise, and you're like, okay, we really need to know what's going on here.
yeah. No, I mean that's probably one of the biggest ones for me too. Just yeah, realizing when she puts on like the helmet and you see that he can see through him and see that he has like the butterfly inside him. So
Yeah,
yeah, I mean, this show is crazy. Just the way that it seemed to each week, I found myself, watching the episodes, and after each week, I was like, that was my favorite episode. And then the following week, I was like, well, no, this one's my new, favorite episode. And you guys just
Mhm.
continued to build and build like each week. So yeah, that would
Mhm.
say that was definitely one of the bigger ones. And then, seeing like the Justice League, at show up at the end, that was pretty wild as well.
Yeah, I totally forget about that because like once I read that, I was like, okay, this is definitely a huge spoiler secret that I cannot say under any circumstances. So even to this day, I like make myself forget that that's a fact. It was like a thing.
Yeah, just don't talk about it. Better just
Yeah.
leave that on.
And then like the day that I was shooting for episode 8 or so, we saw like their names, like like Superman and whatever on the trailer, and I was like, is this the day that they're shooting that? And everyone was like hush hush on set.
Yeah, and that was pretty. I heard too that it was pretty cool that at least for I think it was I don't know if there was that whole scene, but at least like Ezra Miller, which I'm assuming it probably was, but part of that was shot on like Marvel Studio, because I believe like where James Gunn's doing Guardians of the Galaxy 3, like they were able to work with Marvel as far as like filming that scene, I believe.
Oh yeah, I'm not sure what
Yeah,
pieces were shot for them.
yeah, it was something I believe as far as like that goes. But yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, guys. But I thought that was pretty interesting, just where two different entities, DC and Marvel. Now,
Yeah.
for you now, because this was looking at, I believe I checked, but if I'm wrong, let me know. This was your first foray into like the comic book genre, right? Okay.
Yeah, my first big thing, I think.
Yeah, because I just wanted to make sure. But so I guess like, going into this role and playing, a comic book character, what has that whole experience been like compared to other projects, in your career up to this point?
It's sort of the same in some respects, because when we were shooting it, like the Suicide Squad hadn't even come out, so we like for me at least, I didn't understand the caliber of or I guess the size of it, but everyone I spoke to, they're like, "You're working with James Gunn, John Cena. This is a DC property, like it's a huge thing." But for me, it was just sort of like another role. And I think it was helpful that that was the case because I didn't put unnecessary pressure on me,
Yeah.
because no one's ever heard of Judomaster before, and like for all I know, like no one cares about Judomaster. So I took certain freedoms in the way that I could interpret this character, and I was lucky that James had similar idea. So going on to season 2, or whatever else Judo Master might be going into, I think it would also be helpful if I just tuned everything out and just like focus on the scripts, and let that lead my acting as
Yeah.
opposed to like
Having like a preconceived, like notion going into it.
right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it must be very, freeing, like kind of like what you were saying, going into a role and having a character where they're maybe, not as known as some of the other, superheroes or supervillains. And that's one of the other things too that I think I really appreciate about James is that, and he's done this, multiple times now, that bringing, he has had some bigger characters, but working and bringing some of these characters that your average, moviegoer or, television, watcher maybe have not heard of up to this point. And he does a good job of, introducing those characters. And then a lot of times, especially like in your case and some of the other cast members, just those characters becoming fan favorites, which is really cool. But it gives you kind of the freedom to play the character however, you're seeing it rather than being like, oh, well, this is like what the fans are really, or whoever is looking for.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. To be honest, and I've spoken with a few producers while we were shooting, that I was like really nervous to see how fans would receive Judo Master, just because, like on paper, he's like this like short little, like, I don't know if I'm allowed to curse, but
Yeah, no,
short little asshole, and he was like always eating and like showing up at most inconvenient time, like fighting the superhero like team.
yeah.
So I was like, and his costume, like that cow, he looks like a ninja turtle or something. And so I like I'm like, is this like my last thing acting wise? You know, because everyone's gonna hate him. You know, so I
Yeah.
was like super nervous, and then come like episode like 7 and 8, once like they had like the first cuts of the first few episodes, um everyone came up to me who have seen those cuts and they're like, Judomaster is great, you have nothing to worry about. But still I had to live from June when I wrapped until like January to like ruminate. I'm like, I don't know if this is like gonna work, if everyone's gonna hate me on the streets or whatever. So I'm very, very thankful that people like him.
Yeah, no, I mean that must be definitely a relief for sure. But yeah, no, you're a fan favorite and characters, seem to love you. So, and I'm also glad that, your character made it in the end and, hopefully we get to see more of you, going forward like as well. So, now you've gotten to interact with, the Peacemaker crew, of characters, but who else from the DC universe would you like to see Judo Master interact with? Whether it's like, let's say if you did any movies or any other shows or things like that, is there any other characters that you would like to see Judo Master have an interaction with?
I just saw the Batman recently, and it was phenomenal.
Yep.
I think Judo Master would have a fun time fighting Batman, but I think as an actor, I think it would be really fun to do a Suicide Squad, because I just like big teams, and just to see like how each superhero has their piece in like this big mission, I think is really cool. So yeah, I would be excited to do something like that.
Suicide Squad. Yeah, both of those. I mean, that would be great to see you interact with, like Robert Pattinson or the Batman. I think that would be hilarious. But yeah, I mean, the previous Suicide Squad that just came out, that was one of my favorite films of last year. James Gunn, he killed it with that. So that'd be really cool. So I hope that we do get another, a sequel to that movie, or even if it's, spinoffs of the show like they're doing with Peacemaker, which I believe they haven't said like who the character is or anything, but I believe James had mentioned that there is hopefully like another spinoff in the works. So fingers crossed we get to see more of those characters, whether it's the small screen or whatever in the future.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what he comes up with.
Yeah. Now, and just to kind of wrap things up for you, here, is there anything else you want to say to the fans out there, and what is next for you?
I want to say thank you to the fans for supporting us. Next, I am speaking at a panel for WonderCon, which I've never been to WonderCon. I went to like Anime Expo and Comic Con down in San Diego, but never WonderCon, so I'm excited for that. And in a few days, I'll be starting a new project that I'm super excited for, because it's one of the directors that I admire a lot, and we have, I think, similar sense of humor. So I'm very excited to be working with him.
That sounds very exciting. Well, can't wait to, once you're able to obviously speak more, details on that. Can't wait to hear more about that. But yeah, I mean, thank you again so much, for taking time out of your schedule. I'm sure, you're busy, so I appreciate you taking time, coming on here and just, talking Peacemaker with me. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me. Hi, my name is Nully. I play Judo Master and Peacemaker, and you're watching Pop Culture with Pat.